And I can't help but look at say like Bitcoin in 2021, and I see sort of this like Wyckoff distribution, right? A brief reaccumulation followed by a double top right up here, where it had a top, and then another 20 to 30 days later, it had another one. And then ever since then, it's just been a bear market. Now you look at this chart and you compare it to the Ether Bitcoin chart, and you see very similar pattern.
Hey, welcome back everybody to Altcoin Daily. My name's Austin, back again with PhD in engineering, quant analyst, Benjamin Cowen. Thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. A pleasure to be here.
Now, we just did a whole interview perspective on Bitcoin and the macro environment. I wanted to get your take on ETH. They've just completed the merge. It switched the blockchain from proof of work to proof of stake. What were your thoughts on the merge?
I think it's a huge milestone for crypto in general. I'm excited for the implications that it will have on the next bull market. But I still, as we discussed in the last video, I think the macro headwinds are still sort of bearing down on Ethereum, just like they are with Bitcoin. So in the short term, I still remain fairly cautious on Ether's valuation, especially considering it's up, more than 2x, or at least it was, right, before from the most recent lows. So I think it makes sense to be cautious on Ethereum here over the next 3 to 6 months.
And why should the average person, average retail investor, care about proof of stake? How does that affect them?
Well, I mean, it's a different way to secure the network. The world we live in, of course, is certainly leaning more towards, say, like environmentally friendly, and a proof of stake model will certainly look better in the eyes of people who are very worried about, say, like energy consumption. Now, there's a lot of arguments to be had whether that's better than proof of work. I'm not going to get into all of that here, but it is a different model. It's the same model that, Cardano is proof of stake, right? There's a lot of other cryptocurrencies that operate on the staking model rather than proof of work. But the other component I think that I want to be clear about with Ethereum and the merge is that there's this idea that it now should become deflationary, right? And that will provide upward pressure on the price. But actually, since the merge occurred, we've still seen the supply continue to go up a little bit. It's not going up as much as it was, but it's still going up a little bit. And the reason is, this is my opinion, is because the network is not being utilized in the same way as it was, say, back in like 2021. So I do think it will become deflationary in the next bull market, but during a period of relatively low activity, you're not really seeing Ethereum, you're not really seeing Ether be burned nearly as much. And so technically speaking, it's not even deflationary yet. But I think it's a great transition. I was a little worried, from a software point of view, like a lot can go wrong when you make such a big change. But it seems like it's gone off basically as good as we could expect from a fundamental perspective. So I think we kind of all needed that just to have a little bit after what's happened with some of the things this year. A lot of investors have lost trust in a lot of different things. So I think it was a huge win for crypto investors to at least see it go off successfully, even though that's not going to likely be reflected in the price in the short term.
And like you said, daily issuance of ETH has dropped significantly compared to the miners just dumping on the market when they mine the ETH into existence. They've switched, which is bullish long term.
Right.
What are your thoughts on ETH for the rest of the year? Does it come simply down to obviously what Bitcoin's going to do, but looking at BTC versus ETH, or how do you think about it?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to a couple things. It comes down not only to what Bitcoin's going to do, but also it comes down to, of course, the macro headwinds, again, that were the same things that Bitcoin is facing, Ethereum is facing. But also, one of the things that I've been really focused on over the last year is this, and man, this cycle is just going to be known as the Wyckoff cycle, right? Like just the Wyckoff distribution cycle. I feel like this is what I'm going to remember this cycle by. No one was expecting like a distribution phase for Bitcoin, or I shouldn't say no one. I'm sure some people were, but a lot of us were hoping for more of a blow off top, and that didn't happen. And I can't help but look at say like Bitcoin in 2021, and I see sort of this like Wyckoff distribution, right? A brief reaccumulation followed by a double top right up here, where it had a top, and then another 20 to 30 days later, it had another one. And then ever since then, it's just been a bear market. Now you look at this chart and you compare it to the Ether Bitcoin chart, and you see very similar pattern, right? You see a Wyckoff distribution. And this is where I became bearish on the Ether Bitcoin pair, actually, right before this drop. And I thought I was a genius, because I'm like, all right, I converted some Ether Bitcoin, and it dropped. And what's interesting is it went right back up, just like Bitcoin did back in back in 2021. In fact, there were a lot of bears in the summer of 2021 that were not calling for a new all-time high, right? They were calling for it to go lower, and they were wrong in the short term, but right over, say, like a more like 6 to 12 month period. If you look at Ether Bitcoin, not only do you have that first Wyckoff distribution phase, but you're potentially looking at that sort of that secondary, 1-2 punch, like a secondary distribution phase at the very end of it. So that's my main concern right now with Ethereum, is that it sort of looks like it might just be following in Bitcoin's footsteps in terms of seeing a secondary distribution phase. Again, I will admit I'm coming at this from a very biased point of view, because I'm very light on Ether right now. So I would actually prefer for it to lose value against Bitcoin. So I do know that I am biased in my analysis of it. But I still can't help but think that it's just some type of secondary distribution phase. And if you look at things like, like the Bitcoin dominance, and compare it to, say, the Ether dominance, and we sort of just put them on the same chart, we had this exact same move in 2018. So like Bitcoin dominance came back down to, to about, 39, 40, or if I gotta zoom out, it came back down to about 39 to 40%, which is where it just came down to yet again. And Ethereum dominance, peaked up here at sort of like the same, more or less like the same level as it did over here. So you're seeing a lot of or sorry, this one right here. You're seeing a lot of similarities, right, between sort of this move in mid 2018, where the Ethereum dominance had, say, like a last ditch effort to go back up to the 20 to 21% range, got rejected, and then ultimately came back down. I think we're sort of seeing a very similar thing ultimately play out. So those are my main concerns with Ethereum in the short term, are just that it is, it looks very similar to say the 2018 move that we saw back in, if you remember back to April of 2018, Ethereum blasted back up 128% off its low. Everyone got excited, and then it just went right back down. We had the same type of move again, right? 120% off of its low. And if it plays out the same way, then you're still looking at a potential lower low going into the end of the year. And my favorite chart that I always bring myself back to for Ethereum is this longer logarithmic regression chart that sort of shows where we come from when we're in the bear market, right? So in the bear market, at the end of the bear market, the accumulation phase, we're sort of down here, and then we blast out of it into the bull market. But in the bear market, we usually find ourselves coming back into that range. So if Ether USD were to come back down into this range, which is not even that far away from, I think we're getting into much better value for accumulating Ethereum for the next bull market.
So for you, if you're asking yourself the question, buy Ethereum now or wait, for you, you're waiting.
Yeah, but I mean, for full disclosure, I haven't bought any Ether in a long time. Like maybe I bought some. The last time was probably like 10 months ago or something, or maybe not. I don't remember exactly, but I haven't really been buying any this year. And because of that, I've missed out on some of these counter trend rallies where it rallies off the low. So you could argue that someone who has been buying it, or at least maybe they bought some at $1,000 for the first time back in June, they're still sitting up 40%, even at these prices. So I haven't been buying any, but I'm also more risk averse than I think a lot of people in crypto. I'm more so looking for, is it going to get that like say like that final shakeout like it did in prior bear markets, or is this time different? I'll still continue to think this time is not different until proven otherwise. And if I'm proven otherwise, then I'll be happy to come in if the macro looks better and if we don't get the final shakeout, I'll be happy to comment at some point. But I think for the short term, for me anyways, it makes sense to sort of sit on the sidelines.
Ben, awesome perspective. I want to have you back on in 4-6 weeks. We'll revisit some of these. But thanks for coming on, man. And final thoughts for the audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, final thoughts on Ethereum are, look, I think fundamentally it's a great project, and I think the transition from proof of work, proof of stake is going to be a great narrative for the next bull market. So I don't want people to sort of mistake a short-term bad outlook just because of what the Fed is doing with the great things that I think Ethereum is doing, right? I mean, Ethereum could be doing something, great, and it just might not matter if it's bear market, So at the end of the day, I don't want people to sort of lose sight of the overall direction of crypto. We just have to constantly remind ourselves that while we might be bullish on something, there should be some short-term considerations based on more of the macro headwinds.